How y'all doing today? Figure it's time for another video, and trying to get my camera straight. Is that focused? Let me see. Is that good? Yeah, it's focused. Got it. Okay, it's good to see you again. As you can tell, my shop is in array. I am working in it. I'm moving some things around, developing it, making it better, and so that's why it looks different. But let's talk about relationships. Relationships is a funny thing. Um, you know, people do goofy things in the name of the Lord. They really do. There was this woman, I went to this church, and she was over the kids' ministry. She's very good at it too, from what I was told. From what I understand, she was very good at it. And um, so she worked at it, and she would always ask us to pray for her husband. And please pray for my husband. Please pray for he's lost, and she's going on and on, and so we did. We prayed for her husband all the time, and I've worked in construction my whole adult life, and I've owned my own companies and worked for other people, teamed up with other companies to do other projects, and so I've been in construction actually my whole life. I've got a picture of me holding my little hammer when I was 3, and so I've been in it for a while. And I was in construction still, and worked for this company. They had 3 partners, 2 guys and a woman, and I didn't think nothing of it. I enjoyed working for them. We had one guy. He was some people would call him a typical construction worker, meaning he chased women and did all that stuff, and sometimes it was pretty evident. But you know that's something that was he did. I didn't I never got involved in that. Never did do it. And um, so we went on, and well, one day this lady who I was talking about over the children's church, she brings her husband to church, and she came and got me. She says, "Tim, I want you to meet my husband." I said, "Okay," and I knew him. I worked with him. He was a womanizer and did all kinds of goofy stuff. And I was like, "Richard," and he said, "Tim." I said, "Hey, man," and I was like, "This is awkward." So didn't think nothing of it, and we continued to pray for him. Well, he came to church a couple times and got saved. Gave his heart to the Lord. Truly gave his heart to the Lord. And he started to do the things that God wanted him to do. He repented of all the other stuff that he did, asked for forgiveness, and now he's on a new track doing godly things and doing good things and trying to lead his family. Well, his wife had a very hard time with that. She didn't want him leading the family. She wanted him to lead the family the way she wanted him to lead. And he was leading the family the way he felt God wanted him to lead. So she divorced him. They had 2 or 3 kids, maybe 4. They had, several children together. And she divorced him after he got saved. because he was doing what God wanted him to do. And I don't know if he ever got to the place where he felt God was with him or that he was on his side. I don't know, because I didn't see him much after that. And it was probably 20 years later. I was in a subdivision. We had been in there working, and I see this guy. And I said, he looks familiar to me. And then one of the other guys asked me, he said, you know so-and-so? I said, and at first I said no, because I didn't recognize his name. And he said, he knows you. I said, really? And then I realized who it was. I said, oh, absolutely, I know him. But I don't know. I wasn't around him much at that point. So I don't know if he really, you know, stayed with the Lord, or by his wife divorcing him, did it put a bitter taste in his mouth? I don't know. But when you're in something like that, that means that what that shows me is his wife wasn't in it for the Lord. She was in it for her own self-gratitude. I'm not being hard on her or him. Life is life. I have my own issues, for sure. Everybody does. So I'm not immune to them. But it was a hard thing, and I can't help but think, what about the children that they had? How are they going to perceive God? How are they are they blaming God? Or are they going to blame God? Have they blamed God? They're grown men and women. They probably have children of their own. Some of them might even be old enough to be knocking on the door to be a grandparent. But, you know, when you're serving God, make sure you're doing it for the right reasons. You know, I mean, especially when you have, and I've known several instances like that. I've known this one woman. She's went on to be with the Lord. She was a dynamic prayer. Oh my goodness. If I had a need, or from one of my children, or for myself, or if I heard of somebody, and this was before cell phones, she had a phone ministry. Prayer ministry is what she had. She had, I don't know how many people she had on her list that she would call and pray, have them pray with you. And I remember one time my oldest daughter came down with a lump under her arm, and he took her to the doctor. Doctor checked her out. He wanted to see a specialist, and all this and on and on. And make a long story short, when we left the doctor that day, I called her up. I said, listen, this is what's going on. She said, we'll pray. So she called everybody up and they prayed. Well, it was probably a month, 4 to 5, maybe 6 weeks later, it was gone. Every time that we had scheduled an appointment to see the specialist, he was busy. He had emergency surgery, or, couldn't make it. And so the Lord took care of that. So they prayed, and they were pretty powerful prayers. They they believe that God answers their prayer. And, I do too. So, and her husband wasn't saved. And, and I'd talk to him, but I would take it. One day she was at my house, and I was watching the kids. I don't know where Teresa was. She might have been, I don't know where she was, but she wasn't at the house, and she had come over, and we were talking, and she said something about her husband. Excuse me, about her husband. And I said, well, you just need to give him some slack or something like that. And she got real quiet. I looked over, she was crying. I was like, well, that's not what I was intending to do. That wasn't my intention to get you upset. And so it was, she didn't come over to the house for a couple months after that. And then when she came back, she said, well, the Lord had me, stay away for a couple months. No, it wasn't the Lord, honey. You didn't want to come around because I had given you some truth. Sometimes I tend to say things that is true, but I could deliver them much kinder, I guess you could say. I mean, see, and that comes from being in construction. Construction guys, you don't say, please, would you get me that? You tell them to get it for you. And you make it understood. And I don't cuss. I wasn't a cusser. And I didn't cuss them out or nothing. But the way I spoke, my tone, whatever, they understood, well, Tim ain't playing. And so I know how to talk to rough characters. I guess that's where that comes from. And I don't mean to be hateful, or some people see it as being mean. And that's not my intention at all. But sometimes I come across that way. So, you know, and lo and behold, her husband got saved. And the Lord allowed me to visit with him before he went to the Lord. We moved from the area that we were in and got to see him and talk to him. It was in a grocery store parking lot, actually, and he saw me in the car and he came over. He came over and we started talking. Had a good talk, real good talk. And, you know, relationships can be funny, but the one thing that I will say about relationships is God created men and women differently, not so we could stand around and argue over who's the greater sex, the woman or the man. He created us differently to complement one another, because the strengths that you women have, us men don't have. And the strengths that us men have, you women don't have. Now, I know people are going to get their tizzies all up in a wad, but that's the truth of it. I'll give you an example of that. I listened to this guy. He was talking about, this was back when AT&T was Ma Bell, and the government had them break it up, and he was over AT&T, and his wife had their 20th wedding, or not wedding, but 20th high school reunion, 20th or 30th, whatever it was. And, he was pretty well off. I mean, they were, multimillionaires. And I mean, AT&T, Ma Bell, they were, they had a monopoly on the phone system. That's why they were so wealthy. But anyway, they went to her high school reunion, and they were talking, and her old beau was there, and she introduced her husband to him, and he just ended up being just a blue collar worker, nothing fabulous. He wasn't a you know a bump on the log, but he was just an ordinary guy. And they were talking, and they were on the way home. They were talking, and they were saying, the husband said, well, they were talking about how well they enjoyed it and this and that. And then the husband said this. He said, well, you could have ended up with old what's his name, and, been a blue collar wife, And this is what this lady told her husband. She said, no, if I was married to him, he would have been the president, CEO of AT&T and Ma Bell. Now that is a woman that knows her calling. Chew on that for a while. See, God created us to complement. See, the dude, those two, we'll just take those two for instance. He knew how to lead, and she knew how to stand beside her man. She knew how to hold him up. She knew what to do and what not to do. You don't have to lie about stuff like that. You don't have to do things like, well, he just thinks I did this. None of that, because that doesn't work. That falls down to the ground. When you're in a relationship and both of you know your anointings, it has the potential to be a really great relationship. And I think, I don't know whatever happened to him, but it was, like I said, it was a testimonial that I was listening to years ago. And I thought, no, that's the kind of woman I want. I don't want somebody that's standing in front of me with her finger in my face telling me what to do, or pushing me behind me, pushing me into doing something that I know God doesn't want me to do. I want her to stand beside me and support me. And I want to be able to support her, stand beside her and support her, right or wrong, either of us, right or wrong. That's what we're about. That's a good relationship. There's going to be bumps in the road, but there doesn't have to be, you don't have to drive off the cliff for sure. So just a little bit of food for thought, you know, and I think we'll cap it there because I'm going to finish my coffee and go into the house and probably go to bed. But until then, remember, keep praying, keep believing, and keep reading your Bible. You have a good evening.